If it's been a while since you watched part 2 of this series, right now I'm getting ready to cut the tambour groove for the tambour doors, and I'm tracing out and cutting a guide for my router. Now I'm going to work on the tambours, the tambour doors that will be between the bottom and that mid-level shelf to hide the, the satellite and cable TV box. That's going to use 1/2-inch wide pieces. I'll make 38 of them of American beech, and I'll glue them to the backing of it's a kind of a cotton canvas backing. We'll glue that on there, trim it up, and that will slide in the tambour. So right now I'm going to slide in the slot. Right now I'm going to just cut off 1/2-inch strips, and to make sure I keep my orientation right, this is a 1/2-inch thick piece of wood, so they're basically going to be square cross section. I'm just going to put a line right across here so that once they're all cut, I can arrange them back into their original positions and get the grain all matching correctly. Well, I took those long strips of beech that I cut and I ran them through the router table with a 1/8-inch round over just to give it a nice edge. And then I cut these all to length on the radial arm saw, making them 3/8 inch longer than the height of these spacer pieces. And that will allow me to have a 3/16 inch tongue on top and bottom. So the next step in making the tambours is to glue the fabric to the back of these pieces so that the tambour is flexible. Now I've made a little jig here to hold these pieces, and right now I have the pieces set in here face side up so that I could arrange them to get what I thought would be a pleasing look. And the next step is to turn these all over and then glue on this fabric. Now the fabric, it's 12 ounce cotton, what you use to make artist's canvas. It's unprimed, close weave. It's kind of like canvas. When you're making a tent or putting up a tent, sort of like that, except a little lighter. And I'm just going to use regular woodworker's glue to glue that to the back of this. Once I've applied the glue, I'm going to roll the glue smooth to get it nice and even, and lay the canvas on there, and then hit it with an iron right away, regular household iron, to draw off the moisture, get the glue to set faster, and that way prevent the glue sitting there in a liquid state long enough where it could actually seep through these cracks. And And once that's set for a while, I'll take that out, you know, make sure there's no pieces stuck together here, and then we'll be ready to start our trimming and our cutting tongues onto these. So let's just start by pulling these out in an organized fashion and turning them upside down. Well, I waited just a little too long before I tried to cut off the excess where the tongues are going to be, and so I ended up having to run this over the table saw with the blade just barely high enough to cut through the material. But now I'm going to cut the tongues, and so I'll be running this through the table saw to cut a 1/4 inch deep on here because I want a 1/4 inch thick tongues. So it just feeds in there. I haven't greased it yet, so it's a little stiff. Once I lubricate it, it'll go a lot easier. Now I'll cut this into 2 pieces, but this is just a check to make sure it's going to work. I want to have a little apron under the top, something that the door will, you know, abut, that makes it look a little more natural. I don't want the door frame going all the way up to the underside of the top. So I've taken a cut-off piece from making these large pieces, and I've simply taken the bottom or the mid-level shelf and made a tracing on here. So I'll cut that out with the bandsaw, and that will be what I'll glue to the underside of the top as an apron. Before I go any farther, I'm going to put the 45-degree bevel on the bottom edge of the top. I've got all the joinery done, everything's laid out, cut. So this is kind of the last step before sanding and starting to do finishing and glue on the apron and the back stop pieces, etc. I've got a 45-degree shaper cutter on here with a bearing, and I'm going to cut this in probably 3 steps, just so I'm not taking too big of a bite at a time. And I've got some protection here with my plexiglass shield and a hold down. Okay, I've taken the top and the bottom and taken advantage of this time to glue on a curved apron, which I pre-finished and glued in place, and some cleats in the back to which I can attach the back panel. I've left a cutout here in the top cleat for the wires that feed the LED light strips to go through. And similarly on the back of the bottom piece, I've left a big gap for the wires that will run to the satellite control box for the TV set. Now before I glue everything up, I'll take advantage as well to mortise in for the hinges. I'm planning right now to use the L-shaped pin hinges, and also attach the LED light strips, get that all working correctly. And basically anything I can do now where it's easy to work, as opposed to later when this is all attached and I have to work upside down inside the cabinet, I'll do all that stuff now. I'm going to take the opportunity to mortise the hinges before I assemble. So we're looking right now at the top, and it's flipped upside down. And now I'm using the L-shaped brass Brusso hinges like this, and they'll fit down into a mortise that I'm going to cut into the top, and there'll also be a mortise into the shelf on the bottom, and similar mortises into the top and bottoms of the doors. So I line up the pin so that it's split by the front edge of the apron here, and that will ensure that when I open the door there won't be any binding. Now I made up this little router jig that I can use to easily cut these L shapes, and saves me a little time and gets a nice flat bottom. I come back later with a chisel and do a little cleaning up on the corners. So let's go ahead and cut one of these. There we go, that's a nice fit.